Martin, what time's your flight back?
I think it's at 1.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I do want to wait about another 30 seconds to a minute in case anybody's a little bit late joining, and then I'll get started. All right. Why don't I go ahead and get started? Again, welcome to today's webinar. It's entitled California Generator Improvement Rules at a Glance. I'm Rick Silverman. I'll be moderating the event today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few rules before we jump in. We're going to try and minimize background noise, so we have muted all attendees. But we do encourage questions and comments throughout the presentation. Just please use the chat box. You'll find it located in the upper right-hand side of your screen. This also applies to any technical assistance you may need. And then just submit your questions through chat. And once Martin is through his presentation, we'll go ahead and read some of those questions and have Martin answer those. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Martin Bermudez. Martin's a principal consultant for BSI. He has over 30 years experience in the environmental health and safety management field. And that experience ranges from environmental regulatory compliance, biosafety, hazardous materials management, and broad-based projects in EHS management system development and evaluation. Martin's experience providing these consulting services to clients across multiple industries. So please welcome Martin. Martin, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the generator improvements rule that California has recently adopted. If we start in the history of the generator improvement rule, it really was promulgated by the US EPA. And if anyone's gone through the regulations, you'll know they're a bit complex to weave through. So one of the best things about it really was they decided to restructure the regulations to make them much more easier to read. So you'll see that. But they also intended to clarify some things currently in the regulations, and also they wanted to simplify some things for generators. So the US EPA saw it as a positive step. They promulgated those changes in May of 2017, and California, having its own program, mulled those changes over and had to decide which ones to adopt, if any. And so they've come up with the new GIR rule that comes into force on July 1st of this year. So one of the things the US EPA did, some of the simplifications they made was they allowed very small quantity generators, the small quantity generators, to send waste to other LQGs that were under the control of the same company. They also allowed for episodic waste generation. So if you if you had a clean out, a facility revamping, and it pushed you over into a large quantity generator status, they actually had a way to consider that, and so you could keep your small quantity generator or very small quantity generator status. They also required more coordination with emergency response agencies. And they added a Section 4 quick reference guide that they wanted to have available for emergency responders at large quantity generator sites. And they also decided to add the re-notification for small quantity generators to be done every 4 years, which wasn't present in the past. Now, California decided not to allow transfers to LQGs into the same company. And also they did not decide to adopt the episodic waste generation. In addition to those ones I just mentioned, there are other EPA requirements that were changed. They changed some incompatible waste storage requirements. I'll go into details of those a little bit later. They changed some of the labeling requirements in terms of RCRA waste codes. And there's notifications and also clarifying the regulations on labeling of tank systems. All of those were adopted by California, but the last one here, the threshold for single month of creating biennial reports generated for an entire year was already included. California already was conducting that, had that requirement in place, so it wasn't formally adopted. So what did they adopt in total? So here's a quick listing that just kind of goes over what I had mentioned previously. There's the notification requirements, labeling requirements, pre-transportation marking, and large quantity generator closure requirements. There are also new requirements for satellite waste accumulation areas. Satellite accumulation areas also, small quantity generators and large quantity generators are also required to notify and make attempts to coordinate with local emergency response agencies. And they also implemented the EPA's idea of having a quick reference guide available for contingency plans. So let's go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. First is the re-notification requirements. It only applies to generators of RCRA hazardous waste. So if you're only generating California hazardous waste, you do not have to do the re-notification. They must use the EPA form 8700-12, and it must be submitted to the DTSC. No, excuse me. That can be submitted through RCRA info. The small quantity generators are required to do that re-notification every 4 years, with the first one was due in September 1st. Large quantity generators still have the every other year from their biennial reporting, and the notification can be done in conjunction with your biennial reporting. For large quantity generators, they've also adopted special conditions for ignitable and reactive waste. So they did require additional warning signage to indicate for sources of ignition to not be present in the waste storage area, or for all storage areas that had reactive or ignitable waste. They also changed the pre-transportation markings. The columns on the left there, excuse me, are the existing ones that we're all familiar with, but they added an additional one, which was requiring hazardous waste EPID waste codes to be also present on the labeling before it was transported off-site. They also added large quantity generator closure requirements. These applied in general. Normally in California, most local agencies require a notice of closure for large quantity generators, and they typically ask for 30 days notice prior to closure activities being performed. So when California adopted this, they kind of actually incorporated now not into local guidance done by the CUPA agencies, but now it's a state requirement. And these notifications actually go to the DTSC in addition to any that you might provide to your CUPA agency. You have to submit that notification 30 days before closure of the facility. And the new twist now is after 90 days, after the facility's been formally closed for 90 days, you have to re-notify them to tell them that it's the DTSC again, to tell them it is closed and it has been closed in accordance with the requirements of the grant. They changed some of the incompatible waste handling requirements. This applies both to large quantity generators and small quantity generators. Other than the typical segregation into different containers, they now also must be placed separated by a dike, a berm, or other non-combustible partition, which is normally required by fire code, but now they're clarifying it for satellite waste accumulation areas as well, that separation has to happen. And normally this was in the past only applied to central accumulation areas, and now it applies to your satellite accumulation areas as well. And then there's some arrangements with local authorities, which we discussed. So the new requirements require you to reach out to your local emergency response agencies to offer to coordinate and to understand what activities may need to occur when they respond. Part of the regulation requires you to actually document your notification and attempts to reach these agencies. I fully, and we've already run into this, many agencies have not responded or don't have the bandwidth to respond to every request they're receiving. So really, I think the best thing is to document that you're notifying those appropriate agencies, which are listed here on the top right corner. Both, everyone you would expect to arrive at your facility to respond to a release of your hazardous waste. There should be some attempts to contact them and coordinate them to know what information they may need or what information you think they may need to help with the response. So they did change the regulations for labeling of hazardous waste tanks. So they clarified that they actually want the hazards of the contents, that hazards associated with the hazardous waste, to be clearly listed on the tank. And the way the regulation is worded allows you to put just either the classification from the EPA hazard characteristic, but they also added examples that you could also use DOT markings, OSHA markings, or NFPA 704 labels to communicate those hazards. I believe they felt that there wasn't even though there was that requirement in the past, they kind of went a little bit further to describe, we really expect to see some good indication of what the hazards are associated with this. And lastly, and there's also, of course, just a reminder that inventory logs have to be maintained as well to show that that you've met the accumulation limits for storage in the tank, and that those logs must be kept for at least 3 years. So another new thing is this large quantity generator contingency quick reference guide. They're requiring generators to create these guides and provide them and have them available with their contingency plans. The idea behind this was to, in an emergency response where time is of the essence, was to have the essential parts of your contingency plan spelled out. So they required a number of elements to be in here. So specifically the types of hazardous waste, the maximum amounts of hazardous waste that you store, anything requiring special treatment, maps, again, probably HMBP maps might be a good tool here in terms of quick reference guide. They want locations of water supplies and identification of any alarm systems that you have, and the name of emergency coordinators directly. So they wanted that at a minimum on their quick reference guide, so they didn't have to plow through your contingency plan in an emergency, and they could get to that information in a timely fashion. And that summarizes the changes, and I'm happy to take any questions at this point that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Martin. One question that I'm seeing right now is the question is, will the DTSC adopt other US EPA GIR requirements?
So when they did their initial rulemaking, they stated they would do the ones that were mandatory, the ones that were needed to be in compliance with EPA's new requirements as part of their state plan. They did say they would consider the other requirements that the EPA had generated, the episodic generation, et cetera. But they had given no timeline for that, and it's been 7 years for them just to incorporate the mandatory requirements. So they still left that door open, saying they could add additional ones in the future, but I haven't seen any rulemaking activity on that yet.
Excellent. And just to all the attendees, any questions or comments you submit are anonymous. Only our organizer will be the one who sees who's submitting them. And so I do encourage more questions. I do have a couple more right now for you, Martin.
Okay.
One question is, are EPA waste codes required on labels while the waste is in storage?
No, actually, the EPA waste codes are part of the pre-transportation marking. So while it's in storage, you still just need the standard hazardous waste, the generator information, the hazard information, and the accumulation start date. That last bit of labeling that typically goes on prior to transport adds the manifest number and other items. And at that point, that's where you add the EPA hazardous waste codes.
Okay. And then a semi-related question. How are satellite waste accumulation areas handled during a facility closure?
So the facility closure requirements are only for excuse me, I should say the satellite accumulation areas are explicitly exempted from closure requirements. So the closure requirements would focus on the central accumulation area that you're doing and other areas where you may have an impact from hazardous waste storage or generation. They specifically excluded satellite accumulation areas from the closure requirements.
Got it. Thank you. And then, folks, other questions? I've got one more coming in here right now. Here we go. What resources can be used to create the quick reference guide?
The quick reference guide, I think one of the best things to use would probably, as I mentioned before, is to leverage the information you have in your HMVP. The DTSC has actually issued a template that for folks to use in putting together the quick reference guide. And that template you would see is very similar to the information you would see in a typical HMVP submittal. Types of waste that are there, where they're located, mapping information. So a lot of the information that most generators in California have probably already accumulated for your HMVPs would probably be used to facilitate you putting together that quick reference guide. Of course, there's some generators that may not actually be required to file HMVPs, in which case, well, those instances would be rare, but in which case they would have to cobble those information together other than an HMVP filing.
Okay. And then there's actually a question I can answer, and that is, will the slides be available to attendees post-meeting? And that answer is yes. We will include a link to access today's webinar recording. So I hope that answers that question. Why don't we wait a minute or so, see if there's any additional questions. Appreciate the kind remarks for Martin. So people are finding this valuable, Martin. Just thought I'd let you know that.
Yeah, I think one thing I might have missed when going through, I think a lot of folks didn't notice this when the rule came through, was one of the nuances they changed was that in satellite accumulation areas, in California, in the past, you could store up to 55 gallons per each waste stream. And one of the changes that the DTSC adopted in their version of the GIR actually eliminates that. And now it's a total of 55 gallons per satellite waste accumulation area, regardless of the number of waste streams that are there. So it actually did limit that as well. And I believe I didn't point that out during the presentation, but that's, I think, an important feature that I think not too many people were aware of.
Okay. Another question that came in is what information should be provided as part of the notification for emergency responders?
So that slide we had previously had that listing of information, but again, it's going to be, it's going to be, these are the types, these are what the hazards we foresee happening in the event of a release. I think an offer of having them either visit the site or, what info or requesting what information they would like to facilitate a response, an emergency response. So it may be, again, it's sort of leaving it up to the agency to identify that. And I think that's why we're not getting a lot of responses so far from agencies, is they weren't really aware of this change. And a lot of them don't have any processes in place, but we still need to make that attempt to reach out to those agencies, ask them what type of information they would need to have to better coordinate a response, and probably provide them with basics on the types of waste you generate there, what types of hazards would they need to deal with in the event of a release, and what kind of information might need to accompany folks if they have to go to a local hospital or things like that. So you can suggest, and notify them of specific hazards, but the idea was really to try to coordinate with the local agencies to get a common understanding of what information they needed and what information you believe was necessary for them to have a proper response.
Martin, would the HMBP submission be adequate?
No, because one of the reasons why is that submission is going only to your CUPA. They actually expect these to go to local fire departments as well. So local fire departments, local police departments, emergency response agencies that you would expect to come to your site, and even local hospitals are listed as parties that should be contacted.
Okay. And then you've given us some deadlines, right? Some have been coming out for a while now. Some are very recent. Do you have an indication of when the CUPAs will start enforcing these changes?
They're enforcing them as of right now. So yes, and we've already had requests for a couple of our clients where they've asked for their quick reference guide, for example. They want to see that. And so in general, while they're doing inspections, they're already holding people to these rules.
Okay, so you're already starting to see that enforcement.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, excellent. Any further questions, anybody? I'll give us a couple more seconds. We do want to make sure that each of you have had a chance to ask any questions of Martin that you have, or if you have any information you'd like to share as a comment, we'd love to hear that as well. Okay. Well, with that, then I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. Again, just to let you know that we will be following up with an email in the next few days, so look for that, which will include a link to today's recording. Also, if you have any additional questions, you just haven't thought about them yet, or they come up in the next day or so, don't hesitate to contact us using the email that you should see on your screen. There's 2 emails there. And then we have a couple of upcoming events as well, if you want to attend those. On October 5th, we're going to have SILCA Enforcement Initiative, specifically to the Mining Safety Health Administration, MSHA. In November, I believe that's also the 5th of November, we'll be talking about methylene chloride exposure assessments. And then on 19th of November, we're going to be having a meeting on the ozone non-attainment. And so if you have a chance and any of those topics are important to you and you'd like to attend, we'd love to have you attend one of those for us. So with that, I will go ahead and let you guys go. Thanks again for attending and have a great day.
Yes, thanks for your time, everyone. Appreciate it.